Welcome to SF Commercial Property Conversations with Bruce Bean, where Bay Area investments meet expert insights. Get ready to unlock the strategies of commercial real estate success.
So this afternoon, it may not be afternoon for some of you, but this afternoon we are talking to Patty McGuigan, who is a legend in the real estate world of Silicon Valley. She was one of the first women to work in commercial real estate. So I'm very happy to be talking with you today, Patty. And I just love your story of how you even got into real estate. So if you wouldn't mind telling us about that, I'd love to hear it.
Okay. In the mid-70s, I had gotten a divorce and suddenly was the sole responsibility for myself and two children. I had taught school for 13 years, and so English, and I had to take that experience that I had and translate it into sales. And so I did get a sales job working for a division of Exxon called Quip. It was a facsimile machine, and they were trying to break into the office products market and compete with Xerox. And I always love to tell the story. When they asked me, did you have any sales experience? I said, oh, yes, absolutely. And they said, oh, what'd you do? Because in the 70s, if you remember, women weren't a big force yet in the business world. And I said, oh, I sold English to 17-year-old Chicanos. They never wanted an English class. So I had to create that need and fill it. And I think that's probably what you want me to do with your product as well. Well, of course, you know, I mean, if you're going to hire someone, you're going to hire someone that says that. It sounds so trite, but let me tell you, people lap that up. And so I worked there, and they spent a fortune training me, and I had a grand, wonderful time there. But in the meantime, I had remarried, and I now needed to, number one, get out of a corporate world. I needed a job where didn't have to move, because these kids were heading toward high school, and that wasn't going to work. Well, actually, they weren't even in high school; they were still in grammar school. I wanted something that didn't have a moving part, because it's horrible with an office product. So I didn't want to move. I didn't want a moving part, and I just needed to make money. I didn't need a title. I didn't need to be corporate anything. So that was my goal. And I had sold Cornish and Carey at the time. Our Newmark didn't buy us until 4 or 5 years ago. Was one of my clients. They had numerous offices, and that was the key factor in selling facsimile. If you have a number of offices, you need material from one office to the other. So I went down and convinced them that I could do it. And, you know, it was so much fun. Now, this is 1980, and the digital revolution is just starting. And my husband was an engineer, and he was in the high-tech company, and we lived in Foster City, and I knew nothing about real estate or commercial real estate, and I didn't know South County. I'd worked in San Francisco, but you could tell I felt like this is where I needed to be. I was going to make this work. And I memorized the cities because I didn't know the name. I'd go, okay, it's Belmont, then it's Redwood City, and it's Menlo Park. And I'm still not very good at geography, but I figured out how to get around that. And I've spent it'll be 45 years, October 1st, in the business. And it has been a wonderful, wonderful adventure for me. And so with that, I'll tell you, in the pandemic, I started writing, the old English teacher in me. And, you know, I was all by myself. By this time, my husband had died. I was all by myself in this big, gorgeous house, and the office was closed. So I started writing, and I continued. And now I have just finished writing the rough draft of my memoirs, which is called Scraps Build a Pile. And it's a speaker comment he makes when he talks about Todd Speaker is one of the institutions in multifamily, and he uses that all the time. He says, Patty, remember, scraps build a pile. And so I started just doing all sorts of deals, and there were all sorts of people that needed space. And every day you drove down, there was another building being built and another company getting started, and the company you had just put in place now needed more space. And it was a candy land. It was just a candy land in 1980, and it continued, and I still get a big kick out of it. The corporate world has entered that world now. We were really we like to call ourselves entrepreneur, but it was really the Wild West, and it was wonderful fun.
So who were
Wonderful.
some of the early clients you had that ended up growing? I mean, there had to be numerous of them that went
Oh
crazy.
yeah. Oh God, yeah. I had digital. I leased Microsoft. I've done. I mean, you don't do this for as many years as I do it because you haven't met everybody. You know, I did all sorts of deals with Google. I've done Facebook. I had Sergey Brin take a building and he wanted to see the roof, and I said, "Oh my God, if you hurt yourself, they're going to kill me." You know, um, it was it was really funny. I mean, it just did, and I knew I know all those developers. You know, you know, it was magical. It was
Oh
just
yeah.
magical, and so you know, you just they I sold a building for Intel. I love this story. It was I lived in Foster City, and Intel at the time, Moore was down there on Zanker, and I was selling the building. It became Fry's, and now it's going to be. I don't think it'll happen right there at 17 in Brokeout. And he says, "Well," I said, "I've got to get you to sign these papers." Now this was before DocuSign or you know, and I said, "Okay." And he says, "The only time I can meet with you is 7:30 in the morning." So Foster City was 22 miles away from there, and I had to get up early, and I had to get dressed in the dark, and I had to make those kids lunches and everything else. I was running around, and you know, I had to get on that road early to beat the traffic. So I got down there, and of course, there's no offices in Intel, just this sea of cubes. And I find him. I said, "I got it here. You got to sign this. Got to take it over to the title company." He signs it, and he says, "Patty, I got to tell you." He said, "I don't know if you mind, but you have two different shoes on. You don't have matching shoes on." And this was, I mean, I said, "It won't make any difference. The title company won't care." And I said, "But I got to call my husband." I said, "Because I'm having a broker luncheon out in Campbell this afternoon, and I got to have matching shoes on for, you know, to entertain 150 brokers." So Dick brought my shoes down. I ran over to his office, got the matching shoes on, and but that was just the kind of crazy things, you know. Here I have, you know, the CEO of Intel saying, "You know, you don't have matching shoes on," you know. So I always say how's the day? And I said, "You know, I looked down, my shoes match. It's a good one. It's a good day."
It's a good day. You got matching shoes. You aren't running around with unmatched shoes. That is good. Oh my gosh. Wow. Yeah. So you went through the heyday of Silicon Valley growth and all the different companies coming out and so forth. That must have been just wild and crazy. I know we had talked during that period off and on. So it was wild, wild,
It
wild.
was, yeah. I mean, you know, they go in to get a permit from the city, and the city, it would be Wednesday, it would be Monday, and they'd say, you know, "Well, we'll have the permit for you next week." "Well, you better have it by Friday because we're breaking ground on Friday." Now, you could no more say that to a city today. They'd bring out a sledgehammer. You know? I mean, it was just really wild, you know. I loved it. I loved it. It was, I always say I only have one speed, which is fast, you know, and so the speed of all of that really worked for me. And we were all young. I mean, so
Yeah.
many of these
Yeah.
people, you know, all of Google were in their 20s, you know, hormones were running, they were drinking beer. I mean, I can remember when Sergey got married and they had the baby shower for him, and everyone came wearing diapers or onesies.
Oh
I mean,
wow. Oh wow.
this was, yeah, you know, I mean, this is a
Everybody was having a
crazy
great
stuff that
time.
they would do. Great time, great time,
It
you
was
know.
it was
Uh,
the world of well, mad men and mad women. I just going
yes,
having a fun
no
time.
one could believe it. That wasn't that it didn't hadn't gone back east yet. It was definitely California, born and bred. You
Yeah.
know, it was
Yeah.
really here. I mean, the story of and I'm going to forget his name. That started into Fairchild when he started, and it was an odd. I should have the name. It would mean so much more. Um, and he ends up you know, he's the darling in Bell Labs, and everybody wants him to start the company in Chicago and in LA. You know, the Caltech said we'll build the buildings for him and everything else, and he started in Palo Alto. He was an
Right.
only child, and he was very awkward, and his mother lived here, and
Oh
that
yeah.
is why his mother lived in Palo Alto, and that's why
That's the only
they
reason
started here.
Intel ended up out here.
That was the only reason, and here people are throwing money and everything else. And he was from back east. Even if they went back east to get their degree, they still came back to Stanford and Palo Alto and this area. And this area is,
Oh yeah.
it's funny because the music industry was the same thing. I mean, the Grateful Dead,
Right. They go tour around, but end up back here.
Yeah, they trade.
Yeah.
I mean, that was a very interesting time in the 60s and 70s when all this was percolating. It was all percolating.
Yeah. No.
Amazing.
So where did you grow up?
I grew up in LA. I grew up in California. In fact, I've gotten to first half of my life was in California, a UCLA graduate, English major. It would, that's done me a lot of good. The teaching skills were good, because these young men were acting very much like 17-year-old Chicano boys. So I knew how to, the world of real estate is control, Bruce. You got to get, the horse to behave, sign the lead. Got to get him, you got to get him between the rails, and it's the same thing in teaching school, and so at that my school teaching and my exposure with Whip, which was a product I could sell to anybody. And the great thing about real estate was that I wasn't limited to a territory. I mean, in commercial, and when I sold office products, you got zip codes. You got 5 zip codes to work on, and I mean, I used to make this big plea that we had more zip codes, because they, and then they would always continue to shrink your territory. When I got into commercial real estate and realized I could sell anything to anybody, I mean, it was hard for me to head home, because I did all sorts of things. The first year, I think I made 70 deals. I was the rookie of the year. I was in their top 10. And I had never had so much fun in my entire life. It was just one thing right after the other. My rookie year was just every day was Christmas. It was just really fun. And see, there was no supervision because I was the only woman. They didn't know what to do with me. They absolutely did not know what to do with me.
I was going to say, did you have a mentor at that time? Did anybody teach you how to do anything?
Yeah, well, it was funny because Steve Moles, I was his first hire, and it was the first time he was a manager. So he said, go out and make cold calls, which I knew how to do that. So I'd been there about 6 months. And I said, and I'd gotten him a shirt. He loves Stanford. I had gone to San Jose State, but he loved Stanford. And I got it. And in the back, I had it printed out, the answer man, because he was the one I went to if I didn't know what the words were like. I didn't know what a glue lamb was, for God's sakes. I mean, that's not a common word. And so I had made about 6 months, I'd made, I don't know, 30, 35 to 40 deals, something. And I said, now what's the next thing I do? And he says, well, look at who you've made your deals with. And I'd made a lot with the McCandless Company. And so I'd made 6 deals with them. He says, then you call them up and you ask to see them and you ask for the exclusive. And then you get half of all the other deals that are done in that park. And he had, this was River Oaks and there were probably 40 more spaces. I said, oh, that makes sense. So I came home and I filled out the paperwork and I called Burt McCandless and I called him and he didn't answer, never returned my call. So I called a costume company. And I said, do you have a gorilla costume and someone that'll wear it and deliver this paperwork to Burt McCandless with some balloons? And she said, yeah. And I think it cost me $100. And so then, the phone rang and Burt said, well, Patty, I guess I have to see you because there's a gorilla in my lobby. I said, I'll be right over there. So I sat down with him. Now, you have to realize, Bruce, I've been in this business 6 months, but I had done 6 deals with him. And so, and not with him, but with his lieutenant, Steve's son.
Yeah.
But he knew my name. And so I said, and I'm here, I've done those, I know that part. I want the exclusive on it. And he says, well, I have this other building on Zanker, which was really a dog. His father called it the Pound because it was such a dog. It was a 2-story, and you remember in the 80s, nobody wanted a 2-story building. I mean, that was no, they can't have 2-story. It takes too long to build it. We're democracy, whatever, in the same floor. And it was right in the middle of an industrial area. I said, well, this is what I'll do. I said, I want the River Oaks project. I'll take the Zanker project. I said, but I've got to make this successful for you, or you're not going to hire me, and I want to do more business with you. So if you're only going to give me one, you give me River Oaks, but I'll take this anchor and I'll lease that one too. And he thought about it and he said, okay, you can have them both. So I walked back to the office and Steve says, well, how did that go? And I said, it's great. I called him. I went in and saw him. And I've got the exclusives for both of them. I just never told him until years later that the way I got it was by sending in the gorilla, because I thought they might not find that as amusing. There might be some company, rule someplace where you can't send gorillas.
You'd only been there 6 months, so you didn't.
I didn't know that was right or wrong, but I knew I had done what he said, call him up, ask for the exclusive and get it,
Did you ever send in a gorilla again?
I didn't send a gorilla again, but I did lots of other incredibly funny things to get things done. I had an exclusive in McCandless and in Milpitas when the market had fallen apart, and I had 16 buildings. Well, how do you show 16 buildings? How do you have a broker party? And you really want them. So I called up Stanford Band and I said, I want you to come out and play for about an hour for me in Milpitas. I'm having a tour with lots of young men there, and he said, yeah, when you want to do it. I gave him the date. He said, yeah, we can do that. And I said, okay, what do you cost? And he says, well, give us $100. And I said, and you know what? I'm going to throw in a keg of beer. I'll give you $100 and a keg of beer. And for that, I had 35 Stanford musicians. If you've ever seen the Stanford band, they're just all crazy and wild. And I served hot dogs and beer, and and they talked about it. And then they talked about the project. So, I did a lot of crazy things like that. A lot of them.
Can you imagine even trying some of that stuff today?
Oh, yeah, no, it would still work, I guarantee you. Yeah. I don't know. Do you ever get down to Palo Alto?
Oh, yeah, all the time. Yeah.
Okay. On the corner of Bryant and Hamilton. And Bryant and Hamilton
right downtown there.
Is a Christian. Yeah, there's a Christian Science church.
Yeah,
and
right.
It's 2008. So this is out of the 20 years of the Wild West. We're getting kind of a little mature here at 2000.
Yeah,
and the Lehman, you remember the Lehman thing, 2008. Lehman had just gone bankrupt, and the Christian Science Church, I had gotten the exclusive from them to sell the building, which was kind of like being, Elmer Gantry. You had to stand in front of the whole congregation, and so I had a lovely black dress, and this Irish Catholic was given this pitch about how we have to make this city art because we didn't have the right zoning, for office, but I got that. So anyway, I finally get John Hamilton of Embarcadero Capital Partners to put an offer in the building and got everybody to agree to it, and then Lehman's collapses, and nobody knows where they're getting funding, and we've got a signed, purchase and sale agreement. Right. I got a deposit, but he's not non-refundable yet. So it's Halloween, and I found a nun's costume, and I got in the nun. I put on the nun's costume, and I had the brochure, and I took the brochure to my marketing gal, and I said where it says Church of Latter-day Saints, whatever they put on it. Right. That off and put Embarcadero Capital Partners on the apron, and then flyer that. So I had all the flyers that said Embarcadero Capital Partners, and then I called John, and I said, John, are you going to be in the office Tuesday around 10:30? I said, I got something I got to bring over to you. So I dressed up in my nun's costume, and I had gotten a cake at You Can Do This. At Baskin Robbins, and I'd taken the picture, and they're called photo cakes, and the entire top of the cake was a picture of this church, but with the apron reading Embarcadero Capital Partners. So I walk in with this cake and Martinelli and some balloons, and I said to everybody I was coming in, I said, John's expecting me. We're here to celebrate his new acquisition. And I said, come on, all, we're going down to the conference room, and I laid the cake out and everything else, and John, to this day, will say, he still calls me Sister Patricia, HSIA. He's Sister Patricia, and he always says, I didn't buy that building. I was sold that building. How could I not go through with that building after we'd all had cake and champagne on the thing, And he says, now you've got to lease it. And I leased it to Tencent, which was one of the largest companies in China. So I got him a really great, it was probably the craziest, and I honestly think that made the deal.
The
you know,
cake,
he was
the
nervous
cake and
enough.
the
The cake
yeah,
and the nun's
uh,
outfit.
yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
how is he going to say no to that? You know,
No
in front
shit.
of the entire company. You
Yeah,
know,
not
so
gonna happen.
yeah, and so yeah, I still think you can come at this process in a very human way and help make deals. The problem, and not the problem, the challenge we have now is that they've changed our product. You know, I mean, it's like they want to live in igloos rather than houses. You know, this so we've
Right.
got this whole, and it's interesting because I'm on the board of a Rotary, and so we were meeting with Morgan Stanley, and she was saying, this is really interesting that we're really low, as you know, in unemployment.
Yeah,
Unemployment's 3,
right.
4%, terrific. And she
Yeah,
says one of the reasons for that is the flexibility that people have to work remotely.
oh,
She said so many people wouldn't be able to take a full-time job from 8 to 5, but they can figure out 40 hours a week, if they don't have to commute, and
right.
they fit it in. And so plus, it's a gig. Part of it is the gig economy. You get a side job or whatever. But for the
Right.
companies are saving money. The employees are, and there's so many jobs that don't need collaboration. You don't need the water cooler to talk to. You just
Right.
need the thing done. And
Yeah.
so those, and I thought that really makes sense to me because my developers who own buildings who are only going to make money when somebody goes back and occupies that building, that's not necessarily going to happen the way it has for the last 30, 40, 50 years. I think
Right.
we're going to have to remake some of the buildings, and it's like being on a pontoon. You don't know quite what to step on or where it's going to go. But I think it really is a better use of our society and our economic time to have this more flexibility in our working life. I really do.
Oh yeah. No,
And I know that no developer is going to throw up at me when I say that because they think the light's going to go on and everybody's going to come back to work. It's not going to happen.
yeah. Well, for some companies, but not all of them. That's for
Not everybody needs to have that,
no, no,
I mean,
no.
and we created our own monster. We created the computer
The
that suits us.
technology to do this.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the technology. I mean, my husband used to always tease me because we'd love to travel, and I'd say to everybody before I left, you'll be the first person I call when I get back. And he says, someday they're all going to be standing at the airport to see who is the first person you call. But now I have a cell phone. But where I am, I can call my clients.
Doesn't matter. Doesn't
Doesn't
matter.
matter. You can get
Yeah.
DocuSign done.
Yeah.
And it's amazing.
Oh yeah. No, yeah. I mean,
And we've
technology.
created all of that to allow people more flexibility in their job and the location where they're doing their job.
Well,
So
going back to the fax machine, I mean, how many faxes did we send in the 80s and 90s? I mean, it was just crazy. And then
exactly.
all of a sudden that poof, it's gone.
I mean, all of a sudden that was a buggy whip. Nobody was buying. I didn't think
Yeah.
nobody was buying a fax machine.
No, it was just gone. So, who knows what the next buggy whip will be, and we'll see where we go
Yeah,
from.
and as I say, you can. They're gonna. It's just you got to kind of feel it out.
Yeah.
And generations and younger people never have had the experience of working from, I mean, when I first went to work, I left at 7 in the morning. I was in that office at 8 and I didn't leave until 6 or 6:30.
Oh yeah.
That just doesn't happen anymore.
No,
you
that's
know,
completely different. Yeah. Everything's
yeah.
uh,
I mean, I thought when I got a cell phone, I had been delivered a piece of heaven,
oh
you
yeah.
know.
Yeah. No, you could do things from anywhere. It was great. And it still is
Yeah.
great.
And,
So
remember those first car phones, how big they were? Oh my God, they were huge,
I bought one in Colorado. It was just ridiculous. It was a cell phone, but there was only one cell. It was like a radio transmitter from one place. I was in Boulder, Colorado, and they had one cell that sent out from high up on a hill, and that was it. And
Yeah.
you had to dial in, and there were several people. It was really just a radio. It wasn't a cell phone, but
Yeah. I mean, as I say, we've created our own monster. So we're affecting, I think we're affected by it more here in Northern California,
Oh,
where
yeah.
we have we don't have a transportation system basically, the formation of the land doesn't just allow endless development, so
Right.
somehow, some way we'll get through that. Most of the big cities now, I mean, big companies now, the Mighty Five or the Glorious Seven, whatever you want to call them, they didn't do this in the past, but they do it now where, they've got big offices at other places. Apple is closing their car division, which is a
Wow.
shame because Apple would have just pulverized Tesla.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they're turning that into visual, virtual, whatever those kids
Yeah.
use to see it,
Goggles.
virtual
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Right.
goggles. So they bought a whole section of Sunnyvale, which they're going to sell, and they're going and they're reducing their footprint by 10%, and they're reducing their employees here in the Silicon Valley by 10%.
Wow.
But they're hiring in 5 other places in the United States. One of the Carolinas and Baltimore and whatever. And
Yeah.
I think that's where the growth will. We're so addicted to technology.
Oh, yeah.
It's not going to go away, but it's not necessarily going to grow
Here.
magically here. And so I think we just have to tear down these buildings, which is a painful, awful, ugly thing to do, and spend money to get less returns than you got if it were an office building.
Some of them will turn into housing. Who knows what's going to happen? But yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Who knows what they're going to, how it will. I mean, obviously, far greater minds than ours are thinking about it.
Oh, yeah. Well, you talked about Todd Speaker. I mean, he's fortunate in that I saw him just the other day that he was up looking at Hip Housing. I don't know if you know Hip Housing, but anyway, they're a nonprofit that bought a building, and so his mind is just amazing because he knows every little bit of property he owns here and there, and exactly how many units are there and all the different things. So
isn't that amazing? And he just bought a whole slush in San Mateo.
yeah,
portfolio.
Yeah. He's not stopping. So
I found that just amazing.
yeah, no, he's
Scraps build a pile.
That's it. Scraps built a pile. So we will end with that. I look forward to this. When is this book potentially coming out?
I'll have it out. We're just starting. My editors are just starting. You'll love the title. I have a cadre of people that work with me on this thing. I obviously have, a designer and illustrators and PR, and so it takes. So I call it Whirlwind Press. So if you want to write a book, come to me. All you have to do is write it. I've got ghostwriters. I will help you. Trust me. All you have to do is write. We do the rest of it. We have printers, distributors.
This is a whole new business for you.
Oh yeah, it's really fun. Me and Jeff Bezos, we're publishing books and not making any money. That's what we do now.
Wow.
But yeah, it's fun. It's really it's a very interesting. It's taken me down a lot of, and I thought I knew the business world pretty well, but it's taken me down a lot of alleys and byways that I didn't know about, and it's really entertaining and fun.
So have you published some books for other people?
I published one for my brother. If you go on Amazon, I have 3 books that are out there. The Leonardo and the Time Travelers, which is a children's chapter book about Leonardo. We call him Nardi, and my grandsons who discovered Steve Jobs' iPad and the formula for time travel, bring back Leonardo and fix all these companies. It's really a fun book. It really is fun. And then my husband died, and I wrote a book called Beyond Widow. And that's out. And that is, I've actually sold 3,000 copies of that.
Oh, okay.
I sold 1,500 to a fellow that owns 2 cemeteries and 5 mortuaries.
Oh, wow.
Isn't that interesting?
Wow.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
So he
Yeah.
had
And
them
this
on
woman
all
in this,
his shelves.
yeah, the South, she met with the coffin makers, and your wife would know about, you buy a beauty product and they give you a present. It's a gift with a present. Well, our gift with the coffin is my book.
Oh, wow.
Isn't that funny? So they need 3,000 to 4,000 a quarter. It's just really an interesting thing where it'll go. So I've got the second book of Leonardo coming out, and that'll be out by November. And then we're working on Scraps Build a Pile, and I think I'll have that ready by March or April.
That's
Isn't
fantastic.
that amazing?
Yeah, that is fantastic. Well, when I get my memoir done, I'm going to send it to you and you can
Oh, yeah.
run it through the press. Yeah.
Yeah,
that'd be great.
people always say and there's a book in all of us. I mean, I've taught English. All of us have a book inside us, and I've got all the props to help you make it look beautiful and readable and interesting to people and help you find your audience.
Well, we have all the podcast sides set up, so you got the book side set up, so we'll have a team here.
Yes, exactly. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay.
Where do you do your podcast? From San Francisco or San Jose?
Actually, it's based out of Vancouver, Canada, out of so hold on here. We'll stop the recording and we'll talk a little bit here. So it was great to have you.
Oh, thank you. It's fun to be here.
That's a wrap on today's journey through the SF commercial real estate scene. Ready to share your story? Visit sfcommercialconversations.com/guest. Your insights could lead the next conversation.